We'll go with item 4.2, which is our Rise and Report from our closed session. And Rise and Report at 6:30 p.m. from closed session, and that's moved by Councillor Payne and seconded by Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That's carried. And now the Rise and Report, item 4.3, the LPAT issue, confirming the direction we gave in camera. Councillor Nicol, Councillor Fowler, all those in favor? That's carried. Item 4.4, regarding procurement, moved by Councillor Nicol, seconded by Councillor Sadi. All those in favor? And the final closed session report, non-union compensation adjustment, moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everyone. So now we're here to welcome presentations from both of the conservation authorities that we are members of. And I'm not seeing Mr. Hevner here, but I see Cheryl here. So I understand Mr. Hevner's not feeling very well tonight. Well, I think he can join the club. I think there's a lot of sick people up here too. But so we're welcome, and thank you for coming this evening, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So good evening, Your Worship. Thank you for having me, members of council, staff, and audience. Unfortunately, you are stuck with the B team, and that actually happens with LSRCA as well, as the CAO, Mike Walters, is also sick. So hopefully I can get through everything as Doug would. Okay, so just to start, to let you know that we are celebrating our 60th year of conserving and restoring the Nottawasaga watershed. We're having our 60th annual general meeting on January 24th, and I believe your mayor has agreed to come on behalf of the town of Innisfil as well as Source Water Protection, so thank you. We are one of the fastest growing areas in Ontario. In Innisfil, we cover 43% of your municipality, and that includes any lands that are draining into the Innisfil Creek. Our last strategic plan was completed, and we are now working on a new one to be released in 2020. However, these continue to be our important and continued directions related to how the NVCA runs its business. In 2019, I'm just going to spend some time with some of our departments and go over some of the accomplishments. I'm not going to speak to all of them. I understand the presentation was included in your agenda, so hopefully you've had time to look through it. But I did want to say that the watershed health checks in point number 1 have been soft released. They're being formally released at our annual general meeting. However, they are on our website if you wish to look for them prior to that. We're very proud of those. They're a new format and include a lot of important information. We also undertake the development for risk management plans for 9 delegated municipalities, and Innisfil is one of those. That's our watershed science department. In our education department, we have had a record year in 2019. I seem like I'm saying that every year, but we had over 14,000 students again in visiting our camps, our different programs, and that included just over 500 to Camp Tiffin. We did add a new program in 2019 called the Stewardship Camp, as long with a holiday and our March break camp. We're also prepared in the case of a teacher's strike to offer Camp Tiffin during that time so that parents have somewhere to send their children in the event of needing daycare. In our restoration services department, really proud to announce that we planted 139,000 trees last year, and our manager of forestry, Rick Grillmeyer, he'll have celebrated 25 years with the NVCA in 2020, and he has planted over 2.5 million trees in that 25 years. So we're really proud of that statistic, and hopefully he continues on for a number more years. Another important thing is we completed a bunch of projects related to phosphorus loading. We've been able to control over 200 kilograms of phosphorus loading. We eliminated 80 tons of topsoil runoff, and we restricted 100 livestock from our rivers, as well as stabilized about a third of a meter from eroding stream banks, and constructed 600 meters squared of floodplain habitat. In our flood management, we continue to monitor our weather forecasts and watershed conditions while maintaining and improving the monitoring system, and we issued 8 flood messages. I just want to highlight this picture. This isn't from the town of Innisfil. This is from Beaton, which is in the town of New Tecumseh. This is in 2017, but that's some of the devastation that occurred from the 100-year flood event or storm event that we had back then. And our planning and development team, we continue to be one of the fastest growing and highest number of application CAs within all of the CAs in Ontario. We had over 2,400 in 2019. So we're continuing to look for opportunities to streamline processes, working with our municipalities to make sure that we're being as efficient as possible. And we're also working to promote low-impact development. We're a few years behind Lake Simcoe. They have a little more sizable staffing in relation to that, but it is something that we're looking to move forward with as we go into 2020. In our Conservation Lands Department, we did some focus on the Tiffin Conservation Area. It's also the area where we host our children, as well as our main office. We created a green energy, which means it's sustainable off-the-grid washroom that's accessible on our trails. And we initiated a very comprehensive hazard tree removal. We had some, after the tornado hit a number of years ago, there were some trees that got damaged. We'd taken down any that were immediately hazardous, but over the last number of years, some of them had degraded, and so we went through and got those off of our trails. We've also hosted thousands of guests for all of our different recreational outings, weddings, corporate events, etc. And our 2020 focus, so looking forward, we still don't know what Bill 108 is going to do. We're not sure what the implications are going to be. The last thing we were told by the province was that they would be opening up stakeholder consultations in early 2020. They have met with all of the conservation authorities individually. I was one of the group from the NVCA that went down and met with the minister's office and talked about what the NVCA does. And so now it's going to open up to stakeholders, and then they're hoping to have a result out to us. They're saying the end of March now, so we'll see what happens with that. We're also continuing to implement our integrated watershed management plan and the recommendations within it with our partners. And we're working diligently to improve client service and accountability. We understand that that is one of the largest complaints related to the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, and we have made some changes to our staffing, and we are working really hard to make sure that we're getting back as fast as possible to our clients. And like I mentioned earlier, we're hoping our new strategic plan will be released in 2020. Just a couple slides on our 2020 budget. We had a fair amount of budget pressures this year. Our transfer from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry was cut by 50%. It sounds like a huge percentage. It was only $91,000, but in a $5 million budget, $91,000 is a lot of money. We've had some other increases in our wages and employment costs, insurance premiums, property taxes, other maintenance costs, all the things that all of us are experiencing. The total uncontrollable costs for us was just over $245,000. So how did the NVCA address these pressures? We worked really hard to come up with a reasonable budget for our municipalities. We understand that you're under as much pressure as we are. So we looked at our 3-year trends, we looked at all of our expenditures, all of our revenues, and we found a way to absorb cut expenditures, increase revenues to cover almost 75% of the $245,000. And our total ask was 2.68%, which came in under the 3% board-approved guidelines. So for Innisfil, we are requesting in 2020 an increase of $9,311, which would make it $175,540. We take that $175,000, combine it with money we receive from the other municipalities, provincial, federal grants, and money we raise by ourselves to add an additional $4.8 million for a total of just over $5 million for 2020. And the impact on residents, this will mean a 17-cent per resident increase for a total of $12.62 per resident. And we broke it down by our different departments in the chart beside it. In our 2020 asset management, we're requesting your contribution to be $9,491, which is an increase of $70 over 2019. And there's just a list of some of the scheduled projects that we're looking for. And my apologies, that says Springwater up there, that should say Innisfil. Apparently I didn't do my spell check very well. The total ask from Innisfil is $185,031 for a difference of just over $9,300. So that's my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I just wonder if that says Springwater, if maybe we could get Springwater to pay it for us. Just a thought. Questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quick question on the educational piece. Do you track how many students come from Innisfil area or Innisfil schools?
Thank you, through your worship. We do. I don't have those numbers on me, but I can certainly get them mailed or emailed out to you tomorrow.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I just want to thank you again for coming out with us. I look forward to the AGM, and I want to thank Councillor Nicol for being our member on the NVCA board and his hard work with you. Thank you.
Very much.
So the recommendation on the floor for the presentation is moved by Councillor Nicol and seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks very much. Our next presentation is not Mr. Mike Walters from the LSRCA.
Good evening. I am not Mike Walters. I am Mark Critch. I am the General Manager of Corporate and Financial Services and the CFO at Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. It's a pleasure to be here to present the budget to you. I wanted to start by going over again the characteristics of our watershed. We've been doing this for 68 years, going on for 69 years. We're conserving and restoring Lake Simcoe's watershed. Again, it's 3,400 square kilometers and spans 20 municipalities. The jurisdiction covers all but the city of Orillia. We are working to get them as part of our watershed and as part of our board. It's an 18-member board appointed in a 4-year cycle, and you'll see there it's 9-member municipalities that we have. And not a surprise, we are continue to be one of the fastest growing areas in Ontario. So much like NVCA, we have a strategic plan that spans from 2016 to 2020. We are in our final year, so we will be coming back to engage with all of our member municipalities around our next go of our strategic plan that will begin in January of 2021. You'll see here we have 4 major pillars that go in our strategic plan. I won't go through them all here. They're no different than they were last year. In terms of our accomplishments for 2019, you'll see here, last year we came back with an ask for our EMS mapping program. This helps us understand our flooding, current flooding conditions, as well as flooding going forward. And we were able to make an investment here, and this has led to opportunities where we can reduce flooding within our watershed. We also have here in the bottom right-hand side of your screen there, you'll see our KPI website that speaks to a lot of the work that we're doing on our phosphorus, as well as some of the other offsets and stuff that we're able to do around our watershed. We targeted winter salt management, and we had the working group up there. There's a picture of our working group there, identified a stakeholder discussion paper. So we were able to contribute that to all the CAs. We were able to work together around its effective use in our watershed and beyond. We also had 123 watershed-wide restoration projects. And so the next slide will go into Innisfil's, but you'll see there that we had 123 that were started or in progress in 2019, totaling over $2.5 million. In particular, in Innisfil, we had 5 projects that were completed in 2019. You'll see the tree planting and agricultural projects identified on the slide. We also had 4 projects that had commenced and are in progress with some tree planting and wetland enhancements. We also leveraged $45,000 in FCM funding in 2019 to complete building condition assessments at 3 of our major sites. And this has helped us with our financial strategy that we're bringing back to our board in early 2020 that will identify our long-term asset management plan as well as our short-term investments. The report up there identifies in 2020 we will be presenting our watershed scale climate change adaptation strategy. It was completed in December, and you can see the publishing date is on 2020, and we will be circulating that. And we've achieved substantial completion. We're looking at occupancy in early 2020, looking like it's going to be March or perhaps April for our Scanlon Creek Operations Center. And that was part of a budget ask that came a couple years ago. And with your support, we've been able to move that forward on budget and almost on time. Cheryl has identified some of the challenges for Bill 108. We won't get into all the details here, as a lot of it is still in progress. We did have some of the impacts of Bill 108 will impact our budget. The transition period is yet to be defined. We had thought when we started the budget process in early fall that we would know more than we do right now. So as we continue to learn about it, we will start to understand what those implications are, especially in terms of our funding and achieving the approvals at all of our municipalities. That can be a bit challenging, and we're looking at ways to streamline that logistically so that we won't have a lot of bureaucracy and red tape involved with that. And similarly, we're looking around the provincial funding and the reductions that were caused by that. Same 49% reduction in funding, $65,000 was the impact in 2019, and we've been looking for ways to be able to offset in our current budget. One of the important parts for LSRCA is partnering together on projects, and so one of the ways that we've been able to achieve some efficiencies has been working a lot with our municipal partners. And so flood relief programming through the EMS, this is what we spoke about our investment from last year. Those are samples of some maps that would show flooding under different conditions over a 5-year, 10-year, and obviously much more strenuous flooding. And so we've been able to work on the mapping to help emergency service providers know where the biggest risk will be, and they are able to plan their attack, so to speak, as they go out to address those concerns in flooding circumstances. We've also worked with municipalities around our urban stormwater ponds, looking at ways of improving the design and being able to help achieve the optimal design and maintenance features for them, therefore reducing costs at the local level. In particular for Innisfil, this is the Alcona project. This is new, and we're certainly still studying this. We're at the very early stages, and so we're looking at over our different options. There's 3 that we're doing current modeling, and we'll come back with our different options and costing as we get further into the project. But this is one of the ones that we're certainly looking at partnering with our local municipalities. And of course, some of the other areas of leveraging is in areas like asset management, diversity and inclusion, and records management. We do not have the capacity to handle these alone. So by going out and seeking expert help at the local level, we've been able to keep our costs relatively low and still be able to achieve some of the high standards to which municipalities operate at. And you'll see there in front of you, I brought with me the copy of the Budget Companion Report for 2019. I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It will go through exactly our accountability in terms of where we spend our money, what we spend our money on, and the outcomes at which we're trying to achieve. This has been something when we spoke with down with the minister that they certainly like this form of transparency and accountability, and it's something that we're looking to continue into the future as well, these types of published reports. We also, Mike would have been here to tell you all about his semi-annual update where he comes back to the different member municipalities and funding municipalities to be able to go over, what we're doing, what is our operating plan for the given year. It will continue to happen, and we will certainly be coming out for that sometime in the near future. We're also going to be coming back to have a conversation around the upcoming strategic plan. So hearing back from our funding partners allows us to work together to be able to achieve some of our outcomes. One of the new things that we had here, apart from the CEO roundtable, is we piloted a new finance roundtable. And this enabled us to meet with our municipal finance leads. It was a great opportunity for us to share and look at areas of equal concern and challenges that we're both facing, and allows us to look for opportunities to partner better in the future to be able to keep costs lower at both the municipal level, but also for us. And so this was an event that we held in August this year, and we had a pretty good uptake for the first year. We're hoping to build on the success as we continue going on forward. In terms of 2020, as we discussed, this is the final year of our strategic plan. Happy to say that we have completed or will be completing this year all 42 activities that were in there. We're at substantial completion of over 80% right now. The last one is being started right now and will be completed in year, and the other projects are looking to be completed, and we'll be coming back to you with some of the outcomes that we were able to achieve. We're also completing our operational review. This is not to be confused with anything that's being done or expected from the province. This is done in every strategic plan. We examine all of our programs and services, making sure we're doing the right things. We speak to our partners. We go out and have conversations with them, ensuring that we are doing only what's needed to be done under the Act, and that we don't stray too far, if at all, from that. And lastly, we respect the financial pressures, especially in the current year, the financial pressures that we've been seeing. So as we present this budget, you'll see it's a status quo budget. There are no new FTEs identified in here. We had originally planned on adding an FTE for one of our priorities, and we've found a way to be able to do that internally and not have to come back out. We've also deferred strategic initiatives. That's 1% funding that we had last year. We've deferred that so that we can meet the numbers that certainly you guys are looking for, as well as our other partners. And we have been able to accommodate the revised funding targets that our partners have provided for us. So we have gone back, we have sharpened our pencil, we have come in and found efficiencies and found ways for us to come in on target. And so in terms of 2020, we have the last item on our strategic plan is the engagement strategy that is underway, and we're using reserves. We have enough in reserves to be able to cover that off, and that will be the final activity for us in 2020. We have found reductions to be able to offset the $65,000 funding loss that we had from the MNRF. So we have found ways to decrease our expenditures in some of those areas without any risk to our public, and that way we're not passing along the funding loss to our municipal partners at all. We have identified reasonable economic adjustments for our staff, and we have only added inflation where contractually obligated to, and as best we can have negotiated as low as we can for any of our contractual increases. So taking a look at how we leverage the funding we receive here from municipal partners, you can see here, this is a 2019 graphic, not 20. So $394,000 was what we had received in funding, but our total investment of what our expenditures were over $21 million. You can see we get a lot of our funding comes provincially, federally, from the foundation, and so we have been able to leverage that along with some of our fees that we charge for some of our services. So the total investment or work being done totaled just over $21 million in 2019. If we turn our attention to 2020 and the investment in LSRCA, you'll see here there is an increase to $404,981. The first category represents the increase in costs in terms of our costs going up. It's less than 2.1%. The second category, where we talk about the impact of the CVA, as different municipalities grow, they take on a different share of the overall cost structure. In this case, Innisfil has grown a little bit more than some of our other counterparts in the watershed, and have therefore picked up a slightly increased amount of cost. Overall, this is less than 2.7% and is within our board's direction that they had provided for us in the spring. This is a very busy slide. I don't expect us to go through it. I simply wanted to, for transparency, show exactly where our money has been spent for Innisfil. If you want to learn more about what goes into each one of those programs, again, I would encourage you to take a look at your budget companion document, and that will indicate exactly where our total spend is. But it's also important to take a look at what we're achieving as well with what our spend is. And lastly, we're taking a look at finalizing our budget in March. So this is our final presentation. We have received approval at all of the other places that we've been, but we will be going back to our board once we've got the endorsement of our funding partners, and then we can finalize our budget there. And we're still waiting on the implications of Bill 108. We certainly would look to engage with all of our municipal partners to be able to look at ways to address what the outcomes are and when. And last but not least, we have our new strategic plan. As we mentioned, will be coming out later this year to be able to have those conversations, and we look forward to hearing from you about that. Is there any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Critch, for that. Questions or comments? Councillor Sadi?
Thank you very much for that report and for us being able to have that document prior to your presentation this evening. Just a question on the partnering with Innisfil on projects. The one in the slide that shows the developing an engineering design solution to reduce flooding within a study area, which in the map it shows a 6-line to Bel Air Beach Road. Is that, I guess I'm just wondering, the partnership, is that the partnership with the town that the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation does only the engineering design solution, and once you've done that, you give that to the town, and then the town is proceeding to put that in place, or how is that working?
Okay, through you, Madam Chair. So great question, and so I'm going to tell you I'm not fully versed on exactly who does what. I know the partnership, and I know where we're at in terms of the evaluation of the alternatives, and we're certainly proceeding with the environmental assessment. It's just after that, in terms of who does what, I know we have a vendor in place, and we certainly have a contribution that's coming forward, as well as funding that's coming in from NDMP to be able to pay for it. We're certainly not doing the work. It's just a matter of how much we're paying for and what we're paying for. I don't have all those details in front of me.
Mr. Critch, perhaps I could ask Mr. Kane, he might be able to just fill in the blanks a little.
Certainly, through your worship to Councillor Sadi, yes, there is a partnership that is being discussed. There was a previous report sent to Council last year. There will be an update report coming to Council, if not this quarter, then early in the next quarter, just updating, but generally in line with what you just heard, that, you know, right now we're getting the funding and design pieces in place, and then the actual execution, that will be a mix of initiatives between the developer and potentially the town, depending on what that final mix of obligations looks like.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was an EA public meeting early in December held here for that project as well. Other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just kind of curious, in your presentation, you mentioned the number of trees get planted, number of projects you have. Just out of curiosity, how many applicants, permit applications do you get from Innisfil, and is that up or down from last year?
Through you, Madam Chair, I know the permits are down. I don't have the specific information for Innisfil, but I certainly could follow up and provide that information. It's readily available, just not on me right now.
Thank you.
I want to also acknowledge Councillor Waters. I know he's very much enjoying his time at the LSRCA and a very keen and passionate board member. Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, and please give Mr. Walters our best. Hope he's feeling better soon. And the recommendation is that it's to be adopted. Sorry, wrong one. It's to be received as information. And that is, oh, sorry, Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Your Worship. We just wanted to clarify that although you're receiving the budget presentations for information today, you did actually approve, as part of the 2020 budget, amounts very close to this, and our treasurer is confident that the few cents difference we'll be able to manage. So thank you very much for the presentations. You already had the money.
Now we know why the two CAOs decided to stay home tonight, because we'd already approved the budget. Okay. We'll have to hold that little tidbit back next year. Not that we don't appreciate your time, and really, it is actually nice to get a different perspective. So did I have a mover and a seconder, Madam Clerk? No. So I would take Councillor Waters and Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So look at us, right on time. So motion to adjourn, or sorry, the confirming bylaw first, I apologize. Moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? And now we're moving for adjournment at 7 p.m. Councillor Nickel, Councillor Deputy Mayor Davidson, all those in favor? And that's carried. So we'll just take probably like a 1-minute break while people file in. I see there's quite a few people out in the hallway, and we'll get started with our regular council meeting, the first one of 2020. And for those of you joining us online, we'll be getting going in just 1 minute. Yes, so reluctant. Thank you, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to your council chambers for the first meeting of 2020, the first meeting of the decade, and welcome to those of you joining us online. I'm going to just make a small opening statement, and then we'll get going. So I'm declaring the meeting now open and asking if you do have a cell phone or any other form of electronic device, if you could please set it to silent. And if it does grab your attention, if you could please take the call out in the hall, it would be very much appreciated. And it's important that you know that comments made during this meeting are both audio and video recorded and shall form part of the record, which will be retained in accordance with the town's retention bylaw. And you can get more information on what that retention bylaw looks like by speaking to those in the clerk's office. I want to thank any of you at home sitting on the couch watching from home tonight, and thank you for joining us as well. I'm going to acknowledge, first of all, that the first week of first 2 weeks of January have started off with a bang here in the town of Innisfil, and acknowledge how challenging it has been, particularly this last week. Our hearts do go out to those who've suffered home and property damage. We had significant damage. There was sewer backups. We had widespread flooding amongst the municipality. We had people stranded either in or out of their homes. And I want to acknowledge and thank the good people of Innisfil for stepping up and helping each other out. We had many messages where parts of Innisfil were without power for approximately 3 hours on Saturday evening, and neighbors were sharing generators with neighbors to make sure the sump pumps were still running. And in typical fashion, the people of Innisfil stepped up and helped each other. I also want to acknowledge the hard work of staff. I know it was high alert, all hands on deck all weekend for almost all of the staff, operations and service and power, customer service. So thank you for all of the efforts you put in as well. So we're going to start with the open forum. There's 3 items on the open forum tonight. The rules surrounding open forum generally are that it has to be an item on the agenda, but I'm going to ask for council's concurrence tonight to waive that rule, because there are 2 people who want to speak about the sewer backups, and it's not on the agenda, but I think it would be good to allow that and waive that part of the procedural bylaw, and I'm getting lots of nods, so yes, we can do that. So the first name on the open forum is Scott Mingay. Mr. Mingay, if you could please come up. The rules are, that mic would probably suit you best. They are a little sensitive. You have to kind of really talk into them.
Okay.
And, 2 to 3 minutes-ish.
Okay.
Whatever you're comfortable.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am one of the residents of the sewage backup. I'm just kind of wondering, like I've gone through my insurance and my basement's torn apart now. My son and I live downstairs. I'm just wondering, like, I'm gonna go through all the steps. Like, I own the house, but if I go to fix it or whatnot, like, is this going to happen again? Like, I just don't know where the town stands with this. I do install sewers for a living. I have a good idea, but I don't want to make any allegations or anything. But just wondering, like, is there any compensation for this, or at least rest assured that it's not going to happen again, or where we go from there? I've talked with, like, there's 9 homes that I know of that are affected by it. Our street is filled with bins and restoration companies. We won't be able to live down there for a while. I'm just wondering, like, I can get it back to shape myself, but if it happens again, I don't know if I'll be insured again. Like, I just want rest assured that it's not going to happen again, and what the town's doing about it.
Thank you very much for that. I was going to ask staff if we could get an update this evening on that. Again, with council's concurrence, it's a little out of our procedural, but I think it's very important. Maybe what we could do, though, is have the other speaker who also wants to speak on the same issue, and then if you're good with it, I will ask staff to give an update on where they are in their investigation. So the next speaker is Mr. Heger.
All right. First of all, thank you for having us here and letting us speak today. The biggest concern is just like my neighbor Scott has. The insurance informed us if we flood again, even while they're still fixing that, we are not covered. And that is a big problem. And since nobody really knows why or how it happens, even though I have a good idea as well, but something needs to happen that something has to be put in place that doesn't happen in the near future and in the far future anyway, but there should be a permanent fix anyway. And another thing my wife and I had issues with is the response that nobody really got back to us. We called in services, we called the town, and just today, this afternoon, is the first time somebody contacted us from in services. So we kind of were left alone there. That was a big problem for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll start with Mr. Rayner, and then we can talk about these issues. And then I do realize there's one other person on the open forum list who wants to talk about something else, and I think it's good news. So we'll leave that and that open forum piece, deal with this. Anybody here who is interested or watching online that is interested in this topic, there's, besides what the update you're going to be getting now from staff and what they've learned so far, there's also a couple of notices of motion that we're hoping to pass later on in the meeting, and we'll give you a short synopsis, perhaps, of what they are too. Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to members of council and the community. Let me echo first your comments that our thoughts are with the families. I have family who live in Innisfil, and not in this flood, but in previous floods. We lost everything that was stored in our basement, including old photos, christening gowns, and so I have some sense that this can be quite devastating and can take a long time to recover. And unfortunately, nothing I'm going to say is going to make people feel better about that kind of devastation. But let me at least address what we can, and then I'll ask Mr. Malcolm from In-Services to speak, and then any other staff who want to add a comment. To answer the specific questions of where we're at, as this happened just this past weekend, we continue to explore the causation side of this. Obviously, we want to get to the bottom of exactly what went wrong. What we can tell you right now is that there definitely was a failure of a system that relates to the wastewater sewage lines that come into the pump house in question. And we, rather than wait to figure out exactly what's wrong, we in fact have moved to secure as fast as possible with a different kind of solution to make sure that this does not happen. I mean, that would be just the worst possible thing that could happen to these people, is to have it again happen this weekend or something. So with our stakeholders in the area, we have moved to immediately implement solutions to try to prevent this from ever happening again. With respect to the insurance question, I have to admit I'm not an insurance expert, but we are actually working with our broker, and we have questions out now that we're looking to answers for about what can be done in these circumstances. So unfortunately, I don't have more information tonight, but we will definitely communicate that out as soon as we have the opportunity. Compensation in these situations is complicated, and I don't want to sound like I'm not compassionate, but there is a way of working through compensation with respect to insurance companies. And so I think the people that have spoken tonight have done the right thing, which is to speak to their home insurer first, get them activated, get cleaned up, and we will work with residents. We know who was affected, and so we will be working with them on the compensation front moving forward to have those discussions. And in terms of the communication, all I can do is apologize. Our customer service team was fully deployed through the entire weekend. I don't understand how that could have been missed, monitoring both online channels as well as as well as through phone, but I take the point, and we are debriefing this to see what we can do to improve our specific protocols and our procedures. And look, we can always improve. We never are able to communicate as often, as regular, and as comprehensively as we want to be able to do. But every time that we have one of these unfortunate incidents, we do a comprehensive debrief, and we are looking to improve our processes. That doesn't help anybody today, but we are looking to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen in the future. So this would be my initial comments, Your Worship, members of council, and I'll just look to want to add anything.
If we could ask Mr. Malcolm, if you could just give a synopsis of the event of Saturday morning, it'd be very much appreciated. So Mr. Wally Malcolm is the president and CEO of In Services. Mr. Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, residents. At 4:30 in the morning on that Saturday, we received an alarm for high flows within the pumping station number 2 that's located on 6th line. Our operator was dispatched to that area. At the same time, when the operator received that call, they dispatched for pumping trucks to come out to assist with any excess flows that are going into the pumping station itself. And you have to remember is that this pumping station is deep. It can handle significant sewage coming in, but the levels that we were seeing once the rain started, that's what started the issue. So when we looked at the flows, one of the pumps that were in the pumping station did have rags in it, so it was inoperable, so we had to pull that out, clean the rags out of there because it was impeding the flow of water and sewage from that pumping station to our wastewater treatment plant. When those pumps were reinstalled, it was put back into service. At the same time, we had about 5 trucks that we were using to haul the sewage from that pumping station to the wastewater treatment plant. At the time when the peak of the rain hit, that's when all of a sudden the flows to the pumping station peaked. So a normal pumping station, what we see at this one in number 2, is about 32 liters per second at that station. At the peak, during that rainstorm, we were hitting over 200 liters per second, which is way over the capacity of this pumping station, and that's what caused the issue at the number 2 station. So at that time, we did more reinforcement, looking at what, trying to stop the flows, but it was happening all at an instantaneous time that because of the amount of rain and the volume of rain that was coming and the water and excess sewage that was entering that pumping station, it was very difficult to keep up pace with that type of flows happening. So that's the synopsis of what happened starting at 4:30 in the morning and continuing out through the day. So once we got the pumps operating and the sewage hauled away from the pumping station using the trucks, that's when we started to see the levels decrease, and it also concurred at the same time that the rain started to decrease as well.
Thank you, Mr. Malcolm. I'm going to ask Mr. McKenzie if you could speak to what mitigating things we can do now in order to make sure that that infiltration, if we have another significant rain event, how we could mitigate that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I work in the Development Engineering Department, so we're overseeing the Sleeping Lion development. I know that's where a lot of you guys are asking your questions. There's a sanitary sewer system that's constructed in there that's not in use yet, and there were plugs that are industry standard put in the sewer to stop water from leaving the site and entering the town sewer. It appeared because of the rain event, we're still investigating, but because of the amount of rain, those plugs, or at least one of the plugs, did not hold up during the rain event. So we immediately went out and yesterday and replaced those plugs, and we with a better brand, and we are also going to be building brick and mortar wall as a secondary feature to completely block that sewer system until houses are built in that subdivision, and when they're able to flush their toilet, that's when those will be removed. So that's about 2 years down the road. And also at that time, there will be a new pump station put in place. So the old pump station that's there now, it's at capacity. It won't be, the new development will not be draining to there. So that's what we're looking at in 2 years, a new pumping station. And until then, I heard the term rest assured, the water will not get out of the sanitary sewer that's in the ground there now.
Thank you. And Mr. McKenzie, can you also speak to the video, the camera that you put in the 6-line sanitary sewer? Sorry, I should have given you guys a head up. I was going to ask you all these questions.
All right, okay. To you, Your Worship. Yeah, we're coordinating that as soon as possible to get in there and make sure that the new sewer in the 6th line itself doesn't have any deficiencies. It's still under warranty with the contractor, and we're still gathering the testing for that sewer, so we're going to put our own video in there and run it through and analyze it ourselves. Probably, hopefully this week. It's just a matter of lining up that contractor.
Thank you. And Mr. Inwood, from operations, you know, were we prepared for this event, or did it come as a surprise? Did you have enough staff that you needed?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, certainly the forecast modeling indicated we would have a major event. And the week leading up to, last week leading up into the weekend, the operations team was in full preparation mode. Staff were put on high alert standby. All of our equipment was prepared through the week for a major event like this. And despite some of the challenges and how quick the water rose this particular event, our team was dispatched and on top of things and moving water with our pumps quickly and efficiently as can be, given the circumstances and the volume of water that was we were managing.
Thank you. And I just wanted to let people know, too, that on Saturday, January the 11th, we received 64.5 millimeters of rainfall. I don't see anybody here from customer service, but I am going to say that they did have 4 staff here on Saturday. Normally, they only work on Saturday till noon, but they stayed late Saturday and also monitored emails till 8 p.m. that night and then worked again Sunday. But we know that what we're hearing from residents is that the communications wasn't enough, that there wasn't able to answer the phones. That could be partially because at the same time that this event was happening, there was flooding happening on Park Road, there was flooding happening in Guildford, there was flooding happening in Churchill, and some flooding happening, of course, in Bellewart. So, you know, the volume of calls that were coming in not only from the sewer backup, but also from people who were getting very close to having their homes impacted by the surface water as well. Having said that, we are committed to improving from this. One of the notices of motions that will be coming forward tonight will be to ask staff to organize a debrief with the residents that were impacted by the sewer backup. One of the suggestions that came forward was, you know, when we were hydrovacing at, 6 o'clock in the morning, could we not have sent someone door to door and said, there may be a potential that we could have a backup if there's important things in your basement, perhaps you want to try to get them up to the, even just a bit of a heads up so people could prioritize what's important to them. And so to me, that just made ultimate sense as a really good solution and something that we could learn, and also something that I'm sure there's a lot more of those suggestions that we can bring forward as well. I did meet today with the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Gardner, and his I can't remember his title. His name's Steve. He's the inspector that comes out, the public health inspector that comes out when there is an issue. So I was told by them that in-services followed the proper protocol, called the Minister of the Environment, called the health unit who came down, did an inspection at the time. Another call I made was to a colleague who is quite a ways from here. He's the mayor of Tecumseh, not New Tecumseh, but Tecumseh, which is down near Windsor, knowing that he's had issues like this in the past, and I just wanted to hear from him what we could do better or what we could do to help. In 2016, they had 2,400 houses flood, 700 of them were sewer backup. They implemented a grant program with a backflow preventer. A backflow preventer is something that's common in new builds, but not always in older homes. Since then, they've got about 600 of their residents who took advantage of that grant and added that backflow preventer. And the last flood they had, they went from 700 affected houses to 44. And even those 44 were failed pumps or people who hadn't actually done the maintenance required on the backflow preventer. So really good success story. He's provided me with the data for that. So Councillor Van Berkel will later on tonight bring forward a notice of motion, and perhaps we can look at getting something like that implemented as well. Those are all the notes I had. Was there anyone else who wanted to comment on the issues? Councillor Waters?
Just two things. That I'm glad you brought up the backflow preventer, because I know City of Toronto has done the same thing and they've had great success with it. So I think that is a key solution for older homes. Would be kind of nice. And the other thing I did want to mention is that in Ward 4 on Park Road, we did have some serious flooding going on, and there was some good response time from staff to resolve that, because that home was about to be flooded, the basement, furnace, everything else, and staff were able to get out there and resolve that issue quickly and divert their attention back down to Lefroy and Bellure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sadi.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to say that on top of all that, on the weekend was also the loss of power in certain areas in the ward. So many residents were, as you had mentioned, borrowing generators and, concerned with their sump pumps that typically run flooding in their basement. So I think, with the storms and high rain and everything else, that it's also a good time to be prepared and take valuables out of our basements to be prepared for floods. And I have one of those old homes. I'm going to check whether I have a backflow preventer on. But, it just all adds together with the high rainfall and then storm and then loss of hydro and other areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and that did remind me also there is a meeting here this week for the Park Road drainage improvements that we're hoping to get residents to come out to. And when the Mr. Critch was speaking from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority about the Bel-Air Creek Diversion Project, which will be years in the making, but will maybe bring some relief to that very flood-prone area of Innisfil. And I guess my final comment is, my heart goes out to you and your families for what you're going through, and we know that we need to do better, and we're committed to doing that and learning from this experience going forward. So having said that, I'm going to ask now if we could have thank you, Council, for the diversion of our normal regular meeting and allowing us to have that conversation, and ask Mr. Hayes to come forward regarding the no parking signs on Limerick Street.
Good evening, thank you. That is definitely a difficult act to follow, and my heart goes out to people when I present what we've been talking about with our streets. I want to first of all thank council. My understanding is that things have moved along regarding the bylaw with no parking on the Limerick second line situation. Thanks to Mr. Nickel for his suggestion a year ago, Patty for getting me into the process on behalf of my neighbors, and council for acting the way they have. What I have seen certainly seems to, I think, solve the problem that we have. Unfortunately, the problem has already started. As I drove here tonight, they were already parked. Why they're on the lake, I do not know, but they are out there. So it is my hope that things have gone through and will go through, and the signs, my understanding is the bylaw has been changed or has not been changed yet. I just need clarification on that. But my concern is that when the changes in the bylaw are official, that we will get the signs up ASAP, because that's our problem. As I say, tonight they were already parked right on the corner again. And we've had, talking to one of my neighbors who had a close encounter just the other day. So I again want to say thank you for acting on this, and I hope that things will be put into place as quickly as you possibly can. So thank you to everybody involved in this. We appreciate it. That's it.
Thank you. And to answer your question, so it's on tonight's agenda. It's item C2. Okay. And should it pass, I don't think it won't, but Councillor Nickel would beat us all if we didn't pass it. Can I ask you then, though, Mr. Clark, how it works when a bylaw passes? Is there 30 days before we can act, or can we act instantly?
Thank you, Worship. Typically, we want to put up the signs before, so that people have noticed that there are restrictions on that piece. But the bylaw will go into effect immediately.
Thank you. And Mr. Inwood, is there going to be any issue with installing signs this time of year?
Your Worship, no, there should be no implications to getting them in a hurry, so we'll be prioritizing right away.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, and for your flexibility, and also we'll now ask for a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting, and that's moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Waters. We do have one walk-on item tonight, item F2, which is correspondence from the Cookstown Antique Market that we'll be dealing with, and we have some notice of motions regarding the flooding and the sewer backup. So, all those in favor of the agenda as amended? That's carried. Next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest, or disclosure of interest. Anyone with a disclosure of interest on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Our first presentation is our Integrity Commission. Oh, what did I do?
Your Worship, since we were dealing with the flooding issues at the beginning of the meeting, we've put the motions up on the screen if you want to deal with them now, or we could push them to the end of the meeting. It's up to you.
It's up to council. Let's do it. Okay, let's do it. Do we have them up?
Yes, so on your screen there, the first motion is to waive the notice requirements in the procedural bylaw.
Okay,
so that you can discuss the motions that follow.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Nickel. All those in favor? Normally, we would never, very rarely would we ever waive notice, but because these two motions are just going to staff and asking staff to report back to us, it just moves things ahead by a couple of weeks, but normally we would never recklessly just pass a motion with no notice. Okay, the first recommendation, this is when I was going to, you know what, I'll let somebody, who would like to move this motion? This is the one about hosting this meeting to get the debriefing session. Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. And the backflow prevention grant pilot project, that would be Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That's carried. So we'll get that information back as quickly as possible, and we will make sure that we continue to communicate with all the residents in the impacted area and make sure that we give them updates as we get them. Next is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, and now, Mr. Mascarin. Thank you for coming. Mr. Mascarin is the town's integrity commissioner, and maybe after tonight also our closed session meeting investigator.
Your Worship, members of council, Happy New Year. Thank you very much for having me here today. I will explain why I'm here on a report that finds no contravention of the Code of Conduct on an investigation that we did. So ostensibly, I'm here to speak about our complaint 2019-02, a complaint under the Code of Conduct that was filed against Mayor Dolan. This report arises from a bylaw that was passed by council some time ago to regulate parking on a stretch of Thomas Street. You may recall back in December, there was a report, the campaign report, a related report to this very matter that dealt with Councillor Isis and an investigation that my firm undertook. Megan Barrett, one of my associates, a very good associate, who is in her own right the lead integrity commissioner for 3 of our municipal clients. Megan conducted the investigations in both these matters. The report for Councillor Isis was in front of you in December. It was dated December 2nd, 2019. There were a whole host of alleged contraventions by Councillor Isis. Our investigation, which I peer-reviewed, Megan Barrett did the investigation, found no contraventions whatsoever, and we reported that. During the time that we were doing the investigation, the same complainant filed a complaint against Mayor Dolan and alleged 2 contraventions of the Code of Conduct, sections 8 and 6 and 8. Again, arising from the same issue, the complainant was chagrined that council voted the way it did. And if I can just distill it down to its very essence, the complainant basically said it was a backroom deal. Let me say very clearly, we found no evidence of that, no evidence that Councillor Isis nor Mayor Dolan had any part of any wrongdoing in any way. Council had in front of them, a report that proposed a number of recommendations, and council voted and accepted a recommendation. Nothing unusual with that at all. There was no finding of any contravention. So, why am I here then today? Why am I talking to you about this? It's difficult, and I wanted to speak to you because I gave you some training. I came, I believe, last summer. I've been your integrity commissioner now for over 6 years. I haven't had a great opportunity to come in front of you all that often. I said this many times. You've been a very good council. There was an investigation with a number of contraventions that were found. The reason I wasn't there is because I was involved with the matter. I could not investigate a matter in which I was involved. I delegated it to Janet Leeper, who is now Madam Justice Leeper, and she made a number of rulings, found some contraventions. This was in September of 2018. And I sensed from when I came to do the training and education for you sometime in the middle of last year, I can't remember exactly, there was some unease. I think Councillor Rosati actually said, you know, we felt very uneasy about it. We weren't really prepared. So I wanted to come here tonight to explain my role a little bit and what council's function, what council's role is in this. And let me put you at ease. You have really no role tonight. There was a finding of no contravention back in December. That's why we didn't attend. Councillor Isis actually did want us to attend, asked if we could. And I said, you know, it's a balancing act. I can't always do what everyone wants me to do. The complainant would always like me to find contraventions, hammer everyone with the biggest penalty. Council, if you're ever under investigation, would like me to find no contravention and really not show up and not spend any of taxpayers' dollars. So I apologize for being here to do a little bit of that, but I thought it was important. I spoke to staff about it. We thought it was important for me to come. And the real essence of why I'm here is really in the very concluding paragraphs of tonight's report. The complainant in both cases went to the media and disclosed the fact that there were complaints filed. In fact, the report on the mayor, a big splashy headline, said complaint filed against mayor. All of a sudden, there's this allegation of wrongdoing. And in many cases, and what you'll find if you do read the report, and I would urge you to please read it, the complainant actually at one point said, you know what? I'm satisfied with the response from the mayor because, of course, you always have an opportunity to respond to a complaint, and said, I'm going to abandon this. We decided, Megan and I decided, that it was important to write the report. It was in the public realm that the mayor had done something wrong. We could have, like we normally do when someone decides to withdraw the complaint or abandon a complaint, we'll close our file. We'll give notice to the complainant. We may give notice to the member if the member has been advised of the complaint. And that's it. We decided that it was important to write the report in this case to indicate why we decided, and the fact that there was no backroom deal and that this would not be swept under the rug. We thought it was really important to come in front of council and to speak to this. Now, council doesn't have a role tonight because the Municipal Act says if the Integrity Commissioner determines that there's been a contravention, then the Integrity Commissioner may recommend a penalty, may recommend remedial measures. We've done none of that because there's been no contravention. That's where council is engaged and may ask questions as to the penalty or the remedial measures, and there can be a bit of a dialogue. Thought it was important to be here tonight to let you know that, let you know why we weren't here for the earlier report. There was really no basis. Council didn't have any decisions to make. There was no finding of contravention. The matter was over. I wanted to explain that and to give council, any members, an opportunity to ask me any questions about the process, what your role may be, what our process is, and I certainly don't want to take up a lot of time this evening, but I'm here and I would like to answer any questions that you may have, specifically about these reports. Even though I wasn't doing the investigation, I certainly peer reviewed them and understand them, or any other matter that you may have with respect to the whole accountability framework and how it works. So, Madam Mayor, that's my presentation per se. As you can see, I deviated a little bit from the exact report. And by the way, for anyone who's thinking that, why is the mayor still in the chair? There's nothing wrong with her being in the chair. She doesn't have a financial interest in the matter. She certainly has an interest, but she's allowed to be here to speak. And in fact, one of the changes in the Municipal Act recognizes that if a council member has a recommended penalty, which is a suspension of pay, which is a financial interest, the member may speak to council and may seek to convince council that they may not be, they shouldn't be punished to that degree. So the Act actually recognizes this. So in case anyone is wondering why the mayor is in the chair, there's nothing improper with her being in the chair and listening to this and continuing to do your chairly duties. So those are my comments, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mascarin, and you took the words right out of my mouth. I had to ask the clerk earlier today whether I should be vacating the chair at this point of the meeting, so thank you for that. It was actually Councillor Ices who was very anxious to have you come here this evening, and then unfortunately he's absent. So that's too bad, but we did give him the option if he wanted to leave us some written questions, but I have not received any. Mr. Clerk, did you receive any questions from Councillor Ices? Okay. Anyone has any questions or comments for Mr. Mascarin? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's really quite important that Mr. Mascara is here. I think it's important for the public to see that an unbiased report is done. It also shows that, considering our political climate that we now find ourselves in, sometimes politicians are tarred with the same brush across the board. But I think it's important for the public and our residents to see that there is somebody that it can report on issues or where people can go to if they want an investigation. So I think it's important that you are here, that you've highlighted the issues that we've had and what the resolve was. So I thank you very much for coming out, and hopefully the residents understand and know that you're here as not only to be on our behalf, but also represent them as well if there are any complaints against council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Sadi?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mascarin, for your presentation. I also think that it was very important that you were here this evening, and also to give the explanation to not only council but to the public that is watching tonight on the process, and why the mayor would be allowed to sit here at council while this is being discussed. And also the change in the process, because on the previous Integrity Commissioner report that found that it was contravening, members of council at that time that were under investigation were not allowed to speak, and that is one change that has happened, I think, for the positive. And the reason I had the questions before was, and I hope that this is not going to be a common thing that we're going to get very comfortable with, but I think having been through it on the previous council, having felt at that time not prepared in the process and understanding what our options were and what we could question on. And it felt a little uncomfortable that we didn't know that those members couldn't speak and some that chose to. So it helps to clarify that, and thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, a mover and a seconder for the presentation. Councillor Payne, Councillor Waters, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Mr. Mascarin, for being here. We hope we don't see you again soon. Please don't be offended by that.
I actually hear that all the time. I really do appreciate the opportunity to come tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next is an exciting delegation from Catherine Schuston, Management, Engagement, and Community Development.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Dolan, Deputy Mayor Davidson, members of council, everyone here and watching at home. Welcome to 2020, and it's our pleasure to be here this evening to share with you our plans for the celebration of the 200th anniversary of the founding of Innisfil. It's a big year for us, and we have plans for all year long. So this planning process began a few years ago, and so I'm going to invite Kevin Jacob up to give a little bit of background so everybody's up to speed on how we got to where we are today.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, and thanks, Catherine. For some historical context, how we got to 200 years, some very significant events happened in the province just over 200 years ago. In October of 1819, the Executive Council of Upper Canada issued an executive order dividing up what was then Simcoe District into townships. And that was very important because very soon after, from February 1st to March 15th, 1820, Samuel and George Lount, along with their partner Richard Birdsall, spent that time surveying the township. So roughly just over 200 years ago, if we know Innisfil Beach Road, or what was then the 8th line, George, Samuel, Richard, and their surveying crew actually walked what was then virgin forest at the time to help survey what we know as Innisfil. And once the township was surveyed, then the Executive Council of Upper Canada were able to issue what is known as land grants. So once land grants were issued, we had families such as the Houston family, the Souls family, who settled up in what we know as Big Bay Point, and other of our original families, the Warnickas, the Clements, the Lewises, the Perrys, and interestingly enough, some of these families, we still have direct descendants who still actually live in Innisfil and area, so that's kind of neat. And then once they arrived, we really start to see the establishment of permanent European settlement in the township and into what we know as the town of Innisfil today. So if we move 196 years into the future, around 2016, a group of like-minded individuals, members of the Innisfil Heritage Committee, the Historical Society, and other interested residents, along with town staff, came together with an idea of putting together a recognition event or a celebration to recognize this accomplishment. We met with town staff to come up with some ideas and some possible events, and we presented to council these ideas late in 2016, and council of the day endorsed it. So after that, the work really began. One of the first major events that we did is we actually applied for federal funding through the Ministry of Canadian Heritage through their Community Anniversaries grant program. Our application was for $64,000, but we're very, very pleased and excited to receive $31,000. So that's part of the funding that we're using for this. And I know Catherine and Donna are going to be kind of getting more into the meat of the celebration. So I just wanted to provide some historical context for this council, as much of this was done previous. Go ahead.
Okay, so what can we expect this year of celebration? We have planned this celebration around creating unique and memorable experiences for the community, which include concert series, the ever-popular fire sculpture, heritage talks, and haunted walks. And as you know, we have an incredibly rich and talented artistic community here in Innisfil, and what better way to celebrate than by shining a light on our homegrown talents. So we've events like award-winning sculptor Dennis Bolahan from Cookstown will bring his special artistic skills home to create the fire sculpture, and a labyrinth, which is brand new for Innisfil. And as we all know, art isn't just painting on the wall. We'll be transforming some of our public spaces into public galleries, bringing sculptural art to unexpected places across the community, curated by the Innisfil Sculpture Group. Oh, I always do that. I hit the wrong button. Apologies. And as Innisfil continues to grow, one question that we are always asking ourselves, that we hear from the community, that we hear from council, is how do we share Innisfil's storied past with our growing community? And how do we create opportunities, not just for neighbors to gather and to connect, but to build connections across the municipality? And so throughout the celebrations this year, we're really focusing on creating those opportunities for serious exploration, building on the success of our Neighborhood Nights program. We want to bring even more community activities to these neighborhood events. We're looking at combining cultural exploration with our geographic exploration within Innisfil, with that celebration of sculptural artwork dotted around town. And that will be this spring. And speaking of art around town, we have 10 locations across Innisfil to wrap our generally drab utility boxes with historic photos, which will allow us to kind of embed our history into these neighborhoods and kind of invoke that curiosity within the community about where we've been and excitement about where we're going. And finally, we're looking at revitalizing Doors Open Innisfil this September with the goal of helping our community again explore the treasures and hidden gems and highlight the wonderful things that we have on offer here in Innisfil, right in our own backyard. During this time, the Innisfil Historical Society will be presenting an exhibition highlighting 20 decades in 20 objects. And it will create that opportunity for our other partners and organizations, businesses, to participate in this community-wide celebration of us. Moving on. And so while we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the founding of Innisfil, we know that the history of this place that we call home goes much, much further back. So our celebrations will include recognition of the rich heritage of the Indigenous community, and Innisfil and this council has that rare ability to look not just to our past for inspiration, but to centuries ahead to the future. So this year-long celebration is for everyone, from those who trace their lineage all the way back to the founding families and beyond, and to our newest residents who are just getting to know Innisfil. And maybe even for those who don't know us yet, and that there's no better place to call home. So as we went through the planning process, especially planning out for our grant submission to the Department of Canadian Heritage, we planned these events as if we were going to receive the full submission. And after that, after the submission and in consultation with a number of different departments, we've had some additional opportunities arise that were really great candidates for 2020 activities. So there's two examples here. The first was the idea that I'm sure is not new to this council. It's certainly things that we've heard as staff before, and that's installing celebratory banners on our streetscapes. So we know that there aren't opportunities for this in every community. So if we were able to move forward with this activity, we'd be sure to include celebratory signage in other ways across the municipality. The second example is in line with our placemaking policies, our new culture master plan, and it involves the installation of unique and decorative bicycle racks across the municipality. You may recall me mentioning before, the last time I was here, about a month ago, that our infrastructure pieces can be both functional and beautiful, and this is a great example of that. We're looking at these projects as those that can help build that unified town identity that we're all looking for. So as we've gratefully received the $30,000 funding for our projected costs, we don't quite have enough to carry forward with all of our plans, but we're working on it. All right. Oh, one more page. And as you can imagine, a celebration like this takes many great minds working together. So we've developed a number of partnerships with our community organizations, and for anyone who's here or following along at home or hears of anything, if you haven't heard from us yet, you will be hearing from us shortly about those ways to get involved. And to that end, there's lots of ways to get involved in all this fun. So our details about all the various events, including a special calendar of events, will be available online at innisfil.ca/200. And as details are finalized, that will be the place to be for the most up-to-date information. And if anyone is inspired now, really excited about learning more, they're welcome to email us at innisfil200@innisfil.ca. And finally, so exactly about 200 years after Innisfil was first surveyed in February of 1820, we will be kicking off our celebrations in February 2020, and appropriately during Ontario Heritage Week. And that's the week of February 17th to the 23rd. There will be a launch of a special event guide at that time, and I know the Historical Society has a great kickoff on Family Day if you're interested in unplugging from the present and learning some lost family skills, perhaps. It's a great way to start off this year. And with that, I would like to invite Donna Weiss from the Innisfil Historical Society to give an overview of the great work they're doing with their bicentennial review.
Thank you. So yes, before you see a draft of the cover of our Innisfil review. It's created by Ron Heist, and it's our first go at putting some thoughts together. It may change slightly, but we're pretty excited about the cover as something unique and worthy of the front page of our 4th Innisfil review book. Now, this initiative has been fully supported by the council since we were here, the council before this, who approved of it and said, go forth and create a book. And of course, I've been here twice with this council, and the same message has been received. Do what you can, create a living testimony of what's happening in Innisfil. And if you remember, the last one that we did was in 1984, so that's a big span of time from 84 to 2020 to try to capture all of the changes, the people, the directions we've gone. But look at this wonderful supportive group who has been working very, very hard. As I said, they're a fine-looking, industrious group. You will recognize a former mayor. You will recognize 3 former employees. There you will see that there are 2 historians who don't even live in Innisfil working on the committee. There's 1 hard-working man, and there are 3 retirees. So really, haven't we got a great mix? Well, this group has been working since 2016. In 2019 alone, we have put in 2,118 volunteer hours and 23 meetings. So, you know, we're not slackers by any means. We have been researching, we have been perusing old minutes, we've been looking through archives, we've been interviewing, and we have been running the roads. So look at some of the things that I've discovered here. You may or may not recognize any of the people in this photo, but this is the council that was present in 1985. Now, the council themselves are the seated people. They're exhausted, I guess. They're seated, and all the ones behind are the main employees of the day. Some of them have more hair than they do now, and you know how that all goes. This next photo is of the 1991 council, when there was a mayor and 7 councillors. So they're a fresh-looking group. Now, of that 91, I believe there's only 3 living currently. So, you know, time flies, time passes on quickly, and we're trying to record everything. Now, a lot of the emphasis of the book, and I use these as examples, is about the town itself and who's been working here, who has stories to tell about changes that happened in Innisfil. A current challenge is, when did Innisfil become computerized? Well, you know, not anybody can really remember the exact moment. Somebody remembers 4 computers being brought in one day and saying, now we're using these, and it went from there. Now, the operations department, and I think Mr. Inwood, you can't find yourself in that photo, can you? Because you're not there. But we're going to insert you somewhere. Yes. There's the largest department, we think. And look at these fine group. That's our IT department. And so you can see so many aspects to consider, and the photos are incredible that we've accumulated so far. Businesses. Here's a one-person operation. You might not recognize these men, but they are the owners and managers of Tempo Plastics, and who will be celebrating 50 years this year. So when you're talking with people and getting information, you do find out some of these details. And they have over 150 employees currently, so definitely one of our biggest workforces. Now, I know you'll be really curious about what is in there, what all is in the book. Well, we have completed some sections, so we have 41 pages of older citizens. You can see that we have a worship and cemeteries section. The police and fire services, we have a lot of detail. We've heard from different chief police, chief of fire. They all want their little piece of the action, and they're getting it. In the families section, we have over 100 already accumulated. And I have to tell you, I'm very close to the end now. I just don't know where this book's gonna go if we don't cut it off soon. We have over 80 businesses with their stories in there. And they're, you know, some of them are emotional. They're very satisfying to read the story of their ups and downs through their time here in Innisfil. So what we're saying is that we have approximately 400 pages. And I say approximately because really we just don't know. Now, yes, this is the big date. So on Thursday, July the 9th, we will be hosting a book launch. Of course, there are some unknowns. We don't know how many pages. We don't know how many to actually run off. We're thinking 2,000. We don't know what the cost will be or who will even cover those costs. Because, you know, Innisfil Historical took a bit of a leap. They initiated the book, whereas the past 3 reviews, the council came to Innisfil Historical and interested people, and they asked them to do a book. But we're brash, we're outgoing, look what we did. And yes, the biggest question, what will we serve that day? So folks, I draw it to a close. I want you to think about, I have an initial cost of $60,000 for the book. Innisfil Historical Society doesn't have $60,000, but you know, we could work on it a bit harder. We are fundraising though, and we have just recently a donation that's going to help us out. So I leave it with you to think over, what role do you want to play in this, and how can you help us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Catherine and Donna and Kevin for a wonderful presentation. 200 years. I can tell you I feel about 200 years old today. But no, it's a wonderful and exciting project. So we have a recommendation on the table. Do we have questions or comments from staff? Councillor Sadi? I didn't mean staff, I meant council.
Okay. Thank you very much. Looking at the recommendation, and the one thing that came to my mind when I was reading the report was that with this being the bicentennial, we're going to have, I envision, many partners in the community that'll be holding some of their own events. And it's often difficult for council to be able to attend some of these when we get 3 events on the same day at the same time. And we want to show our support. We want to support the community. I do have a motion to amend the recommendation. I don't know whether you want to have any other comments. My recommendation is item number 4, that staff proactively reach out to community partners to coordinate the community calendar of events throughout the town to reduce overlapping events and maximize council and community participation. And this could be some of the larger stakeholders, such as Friday Harbor, different businesses, Cookstown Chamber of Commerce. But I think it's really important, especially as we're in 2020 with all the celebrations that may go on, the Rotary Club, Ice Corp, and all the rest, to find out what are they planning and can we coordinate it so that we can have a calendar that we could all follow. And if I need a seconder for that motion, it's Councillor Ken Fowler.
Thank you very much, Councillor Seti. So we have an amended motion on the floor. Anyone have any questions or comments on that? Great. Well, I really look forward to attending as many of these events as I can, and hope we could get some save the dates or some calendar invites out as quickly as possible so we can make sure that I like Councillor Seti's idea. This year, for instance, Friday Harbor had their tree lighting the same night as Cookstown had their tree lighting, and we've had in the past the different garden clubs each holding events on the same day. So it would be nice because, you know, part of, I think, what makes 200 years and this year, 2020, so special is that whole connectivity piece and making sure that this past weekend we held the council open house. We held it in Cookstown, and people were saying, well, you know, that's not very central, but it's about trying to move people who maybe their regular routine wouldn't take them that way. Maybe it gives them the opportunity to go and visit a part of the town that they wouldn't normally see. And so the next one we're going to have up in Big Bay Point, and we'll keep moving it around the community so that we can get people to connect better, and everybody makes sure that nobody feels left behind and everybody feels like they belong to Innisfil. So I have a question to Mr. Rayner regarding the funding opportunity. The funds, the $50,000, but I think I heard a different amount.
Through you, Your Worship, certainly the staff report that's before you contemplates a top-up of the grant funding that we had anticipated, but I think as Kevin optimistically put, we're very pleased to receive half of what we asked for. And so the report and the approval before you is for $50,000 total. But you have our commitment to work with the Historical Society to have a conversation as they finalize their numbers and their printing costs and their number of pages and color quality. And to be able to report back to you if indeed there is a request for specific funding. I suspect, Your Worship, as we discussed, that there may be opportunities with the surplus to directly fund some component of that, and the surplus report will be likely in front of you within the next few months for sure. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. We'll leave that in your capable hands. And could I ask, Ms. Weiss, is there a drop-dead date, or have we passed the drop-dead date as far as people may be watching tonight who really want their story to be in this book?
You're asking me to break my rule? It's not drop-dead. As we complete a section, it's completed.
Right.
So there are some different variances there, yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, Council, any other comments or questions? Thanks again for the great presentation. All in favor of the motion as amended? Any opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. So next we'll move on to, is there any County Council, Municipal Association updates? Seeing none, I think we should just talk quickly about County Council and the garbage changes. February the 3rd, there'll be a change, not in what you are allowed to put out, the same amount, but just when you put it out. So the changes have been highlighted through a flyer that went to everyone. It is a stop, I won't call it a stopgap measure, but it's County Council's opportunity to make sure that your garbage actually gets picked up on the day that it's scheduled to get picked up. It's a way that we're trying to deal with the current labor shortage that the county has. Is it an ideal situation? It is not. It's the best of the worst of the options that were ahead of us. And County Council has also now asked the staff to go forward with a new tender to find a new supplier for that service. But as you can see, with 66 routes, it's over 16 municipalities in an area that goes from Tottenham to Brecken on the other side of Lake Simcoe to Collingwood. It's a big, to Bradford, it's a huge area, and it takes the new company that would be awarded the tender many months to ramp up to get staffing and vehicles in place. So we thank you for your patience working through what we've been working through since August. It's been a really difficult situation for the county. There has not been, since August, not every route has been fully staffed since August. We only feel it once in a while because it'll only hit Innisfil maybe once every 10 or 12 weeks. Other times it's in Ramera or Collingwood or Wasaga Beach or somewhere else. So we're working through it. The best way to keep up to date with what's going on is to download the Simcoe County Collects app. It's a very good app, and it's targeted right to your address. So if there's a problem with your street that day, it will give directions just for your street, not for the rest of the collection area, but just for your street. So I encourage everybody to download that app. And Councillor or Deputy Mayor Davidson, did I miss anything?
No, Your Worship. I just want to say that the County Council staff who have been working on this, Rob McCauley and a few others, they've been in the office at 5:30 in the morning, 1:30 in the morning, 7 days a week to find the best solution that we could deal with at the time. So I'd like to say thank you to them and their team because they have really given more than 110% of their time and their effort to make something happen for us. And if you think we're in a bad situation, some of the impacts in other municipalities could increase their cost of waste by 10, 15, and $20 million annually. So we've worked very hard to stay within a budget that wouldn't have an impact on the taxpayers with a further hit. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So any other updates? Seeing none, we'll move into our consent agenda. So for any of you who maybe haven't been at a council meeting before, what happens now is we go through a whole list of reports. If these reports aren't pulled, then the recommendation that is in the paper, and there's some, I believe, still outside on the counter if you wanted to follow along, that just means that that recommendation will be approved at the end of the evening. Only recommendations that a council member wants to pull and speak to will be possibly amended. Everything else will go through as with the staff recommendation. So we'll start with the minutes. A1 was the adoption of minutes for the special council meeting in December. A2, adoption of the regular council meeting minutes, December 11th. B1, the Innisfil Municipal Heritage Committee report dated December the 5th. B2, the Innisfil Accessibility Advisory Committee dated December the 10th. C1, the South Simcoe Police Services 2020 cost sharing ratio and the 2020 operating and capital budgets. I'll just quickly say that this is my first full year as a board member on the Bradford, West Gwillimbury and Innisfil Police Services Board. This budget does include a number of new hires, frontline hires. The new legislation through the province, through WSIB and allowing presumptive legislation for PTSD has had an impact in the frontline service for the Police Services Board, and the impact is shown in this budget. but I think it's a reasonable budget, and it's one I think that will still provide us with the service that we require. Next is the C2, that is the parking bylaw amendment on the second line. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. I don't need to refer this. Just want to say thanks to staff for working so quickly. This should definitely take care of the problem in that area. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, looks like you're good to go. C3 is the extension of the Alcona Glen Elementary School joint use and cost sharing agreement. I just want to speak to that just quickly. I made some comments at a meeting not too long ago about that I didn't feel like we were getting the full use for the dollars that we spend. I did take the opportunity to have a conversation with staff, with Tammy Botham, who gave me an update on just how much use we do get out of that school, and so I'm happy to see this go forward. C4, a joint closed meeting investigator update. C5, the designation bylaw for the fourth line, that's the heritage designation. C5, the staff report regarding the adding to the heritage register for the 7th line. C7, the proposed Innisfil developer principles of engagement. I just want to speak to this quickly. So this is something that would be a requirement for developers who are working within the municipality to follow. We did get a recommendation from what was then Integrity Commissioner, now Chief Justice Leeper, that she recommended that perhaps we go towards a lobbyist register here in Innisfil. This doesn't take us to that. There was some concerns about how expensive it would be to have one of those and how much staff resources it would require. The town of Collingwood is, in fact, moving in that direction. So my suggestion is for us to kind of keep an eye on Collingwood, find out how it works for them, how much it costs them, and then make that decision based on their experience. C8, the Churchill Downs water servicing capacity. C9, the Lasami P3 draft approved plan. Councillor Asadi?
I don't think I need to pull it, but just a question on the Davis Loop. I noticed that it's a full circle in that subdivision, and I'm just wondering about using the definition of loop as opposed to a crescent, because when you're entering in your addresses in any online systems, it automatically gives you that option for Crescent Road, et cetera, as automatic. This would make it a lot more difficult for those residents living on that. Just a thought.
Mr. Kane, do you have any comments?
Through your worship to Councillor, we can take a second look at that. I think if the name, if I can beg Council's discretion, if Council approves the name, staff can do a double check on the suffix to come up with what makes the most sense based on your comments, Councillor Rosati.
Thank you, and I just wanted to comment on the other street name, Ardill. Many years ago, it was very sad when we lost one of our firefighters, and we named changed the name of the street to Hofflin, and it was Ardill. We did receive correspondence from a resident who was upset because Ardill was being dropped off because it also had historical significance in the community. And so we're happy to have Ardill back on the list again. And Councillor Van Berkel, I'll tell you the next name on the list for the Lefroy area is Pocius. And we saw a picture of former Councillor Pocius in that one of those photographs from the book. So I think that's quite appropriate. Next is C10, the Alcona Downs 2, Phase 2. Alcona Downs, again, development for the lands described under the staff report. Next is bylaws, the bylaw appointment regarding some of our bylaw officers. I just wondered, I know there was some questions to staff about that, and I wonder if Mr. Vickers wanted to just highlight quickly why we felt this is necessary and how it will be more efficient and save us some time and money.
Through you, Your Worship. Yeah, two of our bylaw officers, we're going to appoint them through the building bylaw. They're really good at laying charges and gathering evidence, and that's their realm of expertise, not that the building inspectors can't also do the same. But what it does is if they're appointed, they can go to court and represent us in their normal course of duties. So there's no budgetary ramifications. It's actually just a housekeeping matter in appointing them, and it adds redundancy and resiliency to our staff and allows us to do sort of cross-functional work. As a couple of our building officials assist the bylaw guys, we can reciprocate from the bylaw side. So there's no cost implications. It's just adding strength to our team, really. And Melissa's appointment, she goes to the counter routinely. And for Philadelphia, a lawyer said, you can't really give me advice. She can say, yes, I can, if you do grant her the appointment.
Thank you very much. One town, one team, right? Working together. Well done.
Okay.
Item F1, correspondence from the town of Tecumseh. I just, again, want to point out this is an issue for us here as well. This is in regarding to misdials for 911, hang-ups and misdials. We had over 1,000 in South Simcoe Police had dealt with over 1,000. Every 911 misdial has to be followed up on. If you do accidentally misdial 911, please don't hang up the phone. Stay on the line and let the dispatcher know that it was a misdial. Save having a police officer come knocking at your door. And just a quick note, if you have an old cell phone you give to a child to play with, it's not good enough just to take out the SIM card. It can still dial 911. You actually have to take the battery out as well. So just a thing we can do that can, we could take as 1,000 calls that we could end and cut costs and use our resources better. And our walk-on item, which is allowing a special occasions permit for a special event at the Cookstown Antique Market. Wish you luck on your event. Next, correspondence for information. Jordana Massey, the Oak Street Neighborhood Group. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to pull the item, but I just want to thank Ms. Massey for her dedication to protecting her neighborhood and representing her community very, very well with a good retort back to the developer in this issue. And the one thing I do want to say is that I don't know how many times, only being on council for a year, I've heard, why did we ever allow that development to go ahead, especially in our flooding areas? This area has some serious water issues, and I think it needs the review that Ms. Massey and her community is giving this development, because it certainly needs it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fowler?
To add my voice to the choir here, so to speak, I'd like to say thank you as well. I've been going over the documentation you've given to council. You referenced the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. You've gone over the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority notes. You've actually gone over town rules themselves and standards. It's amazing the amount of work you've been doing. So when they come forth, there's going to be a lot to be challenged with the information you yourself have provided us to work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I concur with Councillor Waters and Councillor Fowler. I've received several calls on this particular project. Your homework has been unbelievable. Reading it has just been a pleasure. And I approached Councillor Waters this afternoon and said, this is what we need in our community. People who are educated about the problem, speak out about the problem, and help us find a solution to that problem. So I want to say thank you very, very much. And I want to thank both councillors for really stepping up and getting involved. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is the MPAC year-end report. The Class EA for the Park Road drainage improvements. That's just notice, that's January 22nd. Crime Stalkers Proclamation. Innisfil Public Library Board minutes. In-Services Board of Directors minutes. And the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Union minutes. So nothing was pulled. I think that's a first.
I think so.
Whoa. Should we go over it again because we missed some?
So there's the recommendation. Councillor Fowler, it's moved by. Sure. Councillor Payne is seconded by. All those in favor? That's carried. So we don't need to resolve to committee, do we? No. This has never happened. This is a first. So next would be consideration of adoption. Oh no, we don't have to do that either. Sorry, we've done the notices of motions. I am just so confused now. So we're down to announcements. So I'm going to start with Mr. Rayner. Mr. Rayner has somebody that he would like to introduce to us.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll ask Mr. Kane to introduce the newest member of his team, who we're delighted to have and welcome to the chamber and to our illustrious town staff.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, and through the mayor to council. Yes, we'd like to welcome Mary Nordstrom as the town's new manager of land use planning. It's nice to be a former manager making that announcement here and having the abilities of Mary here backstopping the growth team and council initiatives that we're trying to achieve. So Mary does come with an illustrious background, both in the public sector and in the private sector. And I'm quite confident that you will benefit from her advice as her career takes off here at Innisfil. So please welcome me in joining Mary. Thank you very much.
Your Worship, members of council, and I just hope this puts to bed the rumor that Mr. Kane has died. He is still very much an active member of our administrative team and has taken on the role of Director of Growth Services. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, and I'm sure that Mr. Kane sighed a big sigh of relief when he saw Ms. Nordstrom walk through the door. Did you have any words you'd like to say?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just that I'm so happy to be here and work with the amazing innovative team here at Innisfil, and I look forward to future meetings with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of council, announcements? Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not an announcement, but first of all the people that were affected by the floods and by the backup sewers, I want to express my sincere concerns and all the calls that I've had over the weekend. It's been a long, rough weekend, but not nearly as rough for these people that were affected by this. The other thing I want to thank our staff, but especially the people that were out there, our guys that were out on the trucks, that were manning the pumps, and that were up to their knees in mud, soaked, wet. I talked to them, and I just don't know what to say and how much to thank them. You know, whenever I talked to them, they were friendly, they were happy, and they went on with their work. So I really, really, really want to thank them and appreciate all that they did in this past weekend. You have my sincere gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Berkel. Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, couple announcements. Well, first I wanted to say that I caught the clip from your tweet, Your Worship, on the being with our CAO on the agenda on TVO with Steve Paikin on the wonderful interview on the orbit and thinking decades ahead. It was a wonderful clip to see, and it's still available. So I encourage residents to connect on that and take a look at it. Couple of announcements that I have is the Seep Walter Short Story Contest Awards Ceremony that will be held on Friday, January the 24th at 6 p.m. at the Lakeshore Library, and that's 15 stories in the contest from grades 3 to 12 in Innisfil. Also at the Lakeshore Library is our Mosaic Lives exhibit, and that is held throughout the month of January and February, celebrating Black Canadian women and girls, and the exhibit includes photographs, poetry, and unique motivational graphics. There's 2 Barrie Jazz and Blues Festival events at our Ideal Labs, Saturday, February 1st at Cookstown at 11:30, and Sunday, February 2nd at Lakeshore Ideal Lab at 2 o'clock. And again, I also want to thank all the staff from in-services, in-power operations, especially our customer service staff that field all those calls, and to the many residents that in my ward that were impacted by the power outage, those that went around and used their generators that helped people to keep their sump pumps running. A resident in my ward who went and cleaned a sidewalk so that children could get through safely. So we have a lot of heroes in our community as well as in-house here in the town. And thank you, for the patience for residents, and certainly sympathy and understanding to those in the other wards that have been impacted greatly.
Thank you very much. Any other announcements? Councillor Waters.
Just want to remind everyone of the, considering the event that we happened on the weekend and the flooding, is the Park Road Drainage Improvements Public Open House, which is on Wednesday, January 22nd at 5 p.m. And I was able to get lots of video, lots of pictures of what happens on Park Road when we get way too much water. So I think it'll be a good argument to have a conversation around what we can do around Park Road to help reduce flooding in our community.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'm sorry, announcements? I have one I wish to make, and it's a sad one. Innisfil lost a very long time former roads person who was actually worked for the roads department for 49 years, 37 years full-time and 12 years part-time, and he retired in 1993, and his name is Harry Squibb. He died, unfortunately, he died on December the 8th. There will be a celebration of his life at Drury's Funeral Home in Alliston on Saturday, this Saturday, between 1 and 4. I spoke to his daughter today. I'll be attending that, and told her that we would, in honor of Harry's longtime commitment to the town of Innisfil, we'd be lowering the flag at the operations center, because that's what Harry would have wanted. He wouldn't have wanted it at Town Hall. He would have wanted it at Ops. So anyone who can attend, I'll be going to that on Saturday. Catherine.
Sorry. We just wanted to mention that we're in the midst of working on our youth engagement strategy. So we do have a survey aimed at youth ages 12 to 18 available on the Get Involved Innisfil.ca website. So, I'm not that hopeful that there are many youth that age watching us right now. However, if you know some, please do share out. We are in the midst of doing workshops, etc., at the high schools, but this is another way for us to collect that important feedback. Thank you.
Mr. Rayner? Nothing? Anyone else? Seeing none, then we'll go to the confirming bylaw. And it's moved by Councillor Fowler and seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? That's carried. And finally, we adjourn at 8:37 p.m. Councillor Nicol and Councillor Sadi. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Our next meeting now